Hello everyone, welcome. I'm Beastly Eel, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the latest episode of The Acolyte. So, the plot of the episode first, and then we're going to go into kind of my thoughts and kind of confusion of where this series is going to go. Because, definitely like the show and everything else. However, this episode gave us the answers we've been looking for. So we find out, spoilers obviously ahead, we find out exactly what happened on the planet where and what happened when Mai and Osha were, how do I want to phrase this, thought that each other had died. Okay, so this is the big thing here on that piece, and so we get to know the other side. So this is basically like a retelling of episode 3, however from the eyes of the Jedi. So some major things that we want to discuss here are the fact of we get to see the 4 Jedi, which is obviously Sol, Indara, Kalnaka, and Torben. So the 4 of them apparently were stationed on the planet to figure out what sort of incurgence was happening, which is apparently a disturbance in the Force that could potentially be catastrophic. I guess is or something that the Jedi need to be aware of so they know what's going on, type of thing. So during this time, we find out that actually, at least for myself anyway, we realized that the girls had no interaction with the Jedi whatsoever before the start of episode 3. So I had kind of like my own suspicion that Osha had been talking with Sol for a bit, in the sense of, how do I want to phrase this? So in the sense of like understanding each other and everything else and kind of like speaking with each other, they felt like they had a connection that couldn't have just happened automatically. Like there had to have been something that put the two of them together to get themselves closer together than I thought. And that was not the case. So they're going through everything. Sol finds the 2 girls, which was, I believe, the start of episode 3, where they're by the tree, and so he finds them, sees them, and he's trying to get a hold of Indara to explain what's going on. So basically stating like, hey, I found we're not alone on this planet, blah, 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 blah. He then goes back and talks with them. Actually, before that, he actually follows them to where they were going, to their like mining area in the, what's it called? They called it a former mining planet, and they were in some like sort of mining colony, I guess the best way to phrase it. So anyway, Sol can't get in, so he then goes back to the group. He explains to Indara what was going on, and she goes, okay. And although they were explaining everything that was going on, and she was a little hesitant, she's like, well, we have to talk to the Jedi Council first. He's like, well, no, we need to deal with this now. And she's like, no, we need to talk to the council. We're not going to just go out of our way and do this. So during this, they then go back there, the 4 of them. They hack into the system and figure out what's kind of been going on. And in fact, oops, I missed something. Sol actually climbed the building, went inside, saw what was going on in the training that the girls were doing, and then went back and told everyone what was going on. So we had all that going on, which was why the Night Sisters, or the witches, whatever you want to call them, looked in that area, because they felt Sol watching them. So he then leaves. Like I said, he told everyone what was going on. Indara disagreed that maybe they should, talk to the council first and everything else. And so they agreed that they would at least talk to the children to figure out what was going on, because the idea was there would be no issue with witches in general, because the idea is there's nothing wrong with other Force users. The issue, and I put that in quotes, is when they're trying to kidnap children, which is ironic, and we'll get to that later, to use the Force in ways that they do so. So they then continue to do what they were doing. They go in, we know what happens there. Apparently, though, the conversation was, it was supposed to be just Indara going in. And Sol disagreed because of the army of witches that would be there, that he didn't think it was best for Indara to go in alone. So the 4 of them go in together. Then we know what happens based on episode 3. OSHA comes out, explains what's going on, blah, 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 blah. They then state that they should do the test. However, the one piece that was very different here was with Torben. So with Torben, we actually figure out what's going on. So apparently, as soon as they get inside, Mother Anise, I might be pronouncing her name wrong, is corrupting, not really corrupting, but going inside the mind of Torben and explaining and not going back to Coruscant because he wants to go back to Coruscant and not stay on this planet anymore. So she's really digging in that kind of motion of like, all you have to do is just ask for your freedom and you'll be free. So he gives in, and that's when she takes a hold of him. And that's when we see him with the black eyes and falling onto his knees and everything else. So it's during that time we now know what's going on. They're freaking out, everything else. And they obviously release Torben and agree that the girls will be tested. So they leave. The council obviously talks and everything. I mean, not the council. Sorry. The Council of Witches talk, and they decide that the girls should obviously take the test, which we know, and they were told to fail. So then we get to see them take the test. So, what's her name goes first, Mai, and Sol and Indara both know that they were faking it. She was faking her answers. Okay? So Sol asks Indara to change his tactics for the test for OSHA. Indara agrees. They then do so. That's when we get the interaction between everything else and all that stuff. And Indara's kind of surprised with what Sol's doing. And she obviously, OSHA finally shows her true powers and everything else and explains what she's doing and all that stuff. So we have that, and then they leave. So the big piece here is apparently, obviously most of the stuff stays the same. The piece that they showed extra was what happens after the two girls leave. So the idea is, the girls, OSHA's going to go with the Jedi, right? And Indara's actually like, no, the girl could stay here. There's nothing going wrong. I mean, obviously, if it's what she wants, fine, but we're not going to force, if they don't want her to go, we're not going to force her to go. And this is where Sol kind of talks about how he's connected to her and how they have a connection and that they should be together and blah, blah, blah. Which Indara finds very concerning, which everyone should find this concerning. So we have Torben, who looks at the blood samples of the two girls, and they're identical, and Indara's like, that's not all that shocking, they're twins. And he's like, no, they're like perfectly identical, like in a way that shouldn't be. And that's when they come to the realization, or the thought at the very least, I shouldn't say realization, because it's not confirmed, to them anyway. But the thought is that these two girls are the reason for the incursion of the Force, which created the two of them to begin with. And that they were apparently, whatever they were one person that was legitimately split into two in some sort of capacity. So we don't know if it was a person to begin with, if they were trying to clone, what it may be, you know what I'm saying? There's still pieces that we don't know. However, there was some way that they were trying to make one person, and it split into two different people, which turned into Mai and OSHA. Two very different, but also the same, which I would imagine they're the same in every way except for their personalities. And that's what makes them different. So that's when Torben thinks this is the great opportunity to realize this is our way out of here. So he then tries to go and get them. Sol goes to stop him. Indara and Kelnaka also go to help figure out what's going on. So when they get there, they break in, shockingly, and then we see the witches actually fight as well. So they realize this is going to be a problem, so they decide to call all their arms. Now obviously the fire's going on and everything else. So now we have Sol and Torben. Torben hasn't raised his, took out his lightsaber. Sol doesn't think it's a good idea. That's when Mother Asaya, who hears all her two children crying, she does like this dark force witch magic where her body almost turns into a dark mist. But before she completely dissipates, that's when Sol pulls out his lightsaber and stabs her right through the chest and kills her. And that's when, on her dying breath, she explains to Sol that OSHA wants to go with you. Take her with you. and she dies. Now Mother Coral, on the other hand, is not happy and begins to fight Soul. Now she's fighting him. He's refusing to fight back. However, he's not letting himself die, but he's refusing to fight back. And then all the other witches are shooting arrows at Torben, who is destroying them with his lightsaber. So she then, Mother Coral then disappears along with all the other witches, the same way that Mother Anise was doing. However, they were successful and left. And what they were doing was they were talking and trying to convince somebody that their friends were evil. And Sol and Torben are like, we're not going to fall for it. We're fine. And Mother Coral's like, we're not talking to you. And that's when Kilnaka comes out, completely the same black guys that we saw with Torben, and go full toe-to-toe, crazy fight with Sol and Torben. So he takes out his lightsaber and starts trying to kill Torben and Sol. Now, Torben and Sol are trying to stop Kilnaka without killing him, which is not easy. So they get thrown around a lot, and in fact, at one point, Torben gets grabbed by Kilnaka, slammed up against the wall, to the point where he's got claw marks on his eyes, which is the scars we see later on. It gets so bad that Indara has to come in, jump on top of Kilnaka, slam him to the ground, use the Force to legitimately what looks like, and I don't know how true this is, because this is the piece that I'm not 100% sure of, looks like she had to use the Force to kill the witches to save Kilnaka. And that is only, then and only then, does she tell Sol to go get the girls, because they're going to take them back to Coruscant. Sol is reluctant at first, but goes anyway. So the other piece that we have here that's different, so we have them on the two rickety bridges. Stereotypical Star Wars. You know what I mean? Like the bridge broke in half, and neither side is like fully stable. He uses the Force to protect both of them. However, he has this connection with Osha, so he lets Mai fall. Which I did not realize that was the case to begin with. So he then obviously jumps, saves her, and everything else. He brings her back to the ship, which we already know, blah, blah, blah. Before she wakes up, though, Indara and Sol are having a conversation. Sol's ready to admit what he did was wrong and condone for his sins. Indara's like, no, you wanted this, you're gonna deal with this. You're not gonna get the easy way out of this. You're gonna have Osha as your apprentice, and you're gonna be telling her that everyone died in the fire. Which technically is not 100% false. However, it obviously is not the full truth either. So because of all that, Sol finally, when Osha wakes up, he tells her exactly what Indara wants him to do. And that, my friends, is the end of the episode. So a couple of big things here is Sol and Torben are definitely not the best Jedi, for sure. And I liked Sol too, and I don't like him as much now. He wanted that girl so bad, which is very much creepy in all its sense. So he wanted her for whatever the reason, and I'm wondering if the connection is the fact that the two of them will actually have to face off against each other. Because now Osha is on with the Quamir, and the dark side, and Sol is obviously supposed to be the light. So I'm very curious if she's going to turn to the dark side, which I'm imagining she will, and then go against Sol himself. Which also explains why Torben was distraught about everything that was going on, because it was his own insecurities about not going home that caused the destruction of those people. And then Kilnaka just leaving completely just because he wanted to get away from everything. And then Indara was the least amount of phased by it, because at this point she was, and again, I can't really speak for Kilnaka because I would imagine he's probably had more experience than Indara, but bear with me. Indara, on the other hand, was much more of a master in the sense of like knowing what was going on, dealt with what needed to be dealt with, and was able to move on. Where the others obviously were younger, less experienced, and again, Kilnaka's a little different because Wookiees live long. My thing with there's not many, obviously, Wookiee Jedi, so it'll be very interesting. I wonder if it's just harder for them to understand certain concepts. I'm guessing just with the Force in general and the way of the Jedi Order, but I could be wrong. But this is just an assumption I have. And because of that, she was the least phased by it, because she was able to live a normal life after. Where Sol went into the academy and was teaching the younglings because he couldn't go back out in the field anymore. Or couldn't, or didn't want to. Any of the which, right? So we have all that going on. However, opportunity to know for sure. My guess would be Osha finds out what's going on and then goes after Soul, which does sort of make sense. However, that's the only thing that makes sense to me right this very second. So we'll have to wait and see. Overall, though, excuse me. Overall, I have to say I'm very impressed with this series and how it really makes us really question the Jedi and the dark side, like the light side and the dark side. So I'm very curious how that's going to continue, and also if any of the witches actually survived. I know it looked like they didn't, but we don't know if they all died either. So I'm very curious on that part. The only one we know for sure is dead is Mother Nyase, because she was killed by Soul. So other than that, I mean, we have a lot to deal with and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm very curious. I definitely, Soul is not the good guy, like I thought, and he's probably going to have to face his demons, which is going to be Osha, and seeing what happens there. But let me know what you guys thought about this episode in the comments down below.